Okay, we'll go ahead and call the Tuesday, October 8th, 2019 City Council meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And we will go ahead and ask for the roll call, please. Here.
James here.
Here.
Milczewski. Here. Locher.
Here.
Bunkhauser.
Here.
Frieders.
Here.
Chirulis.
Here.
Peterson is absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay, no. We have presentations, employee appreciation of service. I think we have 3 tonight. Is that correct?
You?
Yes, and I think the different department heads are going to do those. So who's going to start first? Tim? I think you volunteer.
I guess so. I don't remember raising my hand.
What's that?
I didn't raise my hand, but
Oh, I just thought I saw you.
I think that was Brad.
Maybe, yeah, maybe it was. This is yours, Steve. Aaron, you can do that. You want me up there too? Well, I don't mind. I just
call too.
Oh, well, you know what? I'll stand up and wait. Every time I come in here, I need a walk, right? So go ahead.
Yes. Just so everyone knows, my name is Tim Evans. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation. This is Steve Redmond. He's a Recreation Coordinator here at the City of Yorkville. I know tonight we are actually honoring Steve for his 5 years of service, but really Steve's been working with the city for 10 plus years. He started off with us as a high school student. He was actually one of the first hires that I ever had. Pretty good hire since he's still here 10 years later. Just a little bit about Steve. And if you don't know Steve, which would be shocking to me, Steve doesn't know everybody and everybody knows Steve. Usually when I'm out at an event or someone gives me a phone call and I don't know the answer, more than likely the response back to me is, don't worry, I'll talk to Steve about it. So it's pretty confident to Steve that people trust him, know him, and come to him with their questions and answers. He's a lifelong resident of Yorkville, born and raised here, graduated from Yorkville High School. After graduating from Yorkville High School, went off to Avanzi College trying to think about what he wanted to do. Shay and I, the superintendent, ran, encouraged him, thought he'd be a great Parks and Recreation employee. Knowing that he had great bosses in myself and Shay, he decided to go to St. Francis University, where he graduated with a degree in Parks and Recreation. 2 great things about Steve while he was graduating from St. Francis. One, because we started him in our city pension program at like 17 years old. Because he was so valuable working with so many hours, we hit the limit. And I was like, we got to put Steve in IMRF, and I convinced Bart to do it. And I always joke with Steve that he is the guy that's going to retire at 55 with his full pension, and he will be going around to other cities saying, you can retire at 55, start working for your city at 17, and that will be his post-retirement job. The second thing was when he was about to graduate his last semester, we had an opening. Shay and I had been sweating him for like a year, going, what are we going to do with Steve? We encouraged him to join this field. We don't have a job. I'm like, I'm going to ask for Bart Dykem, the city council, to do a position for him. But we had an opening, and then I couldn't believe it. The university fought me on it. They're like, he's got to finish school. You can't hire him. And I'm like, are you kidding me? The whole point of graduating is a job. We have a job for him. But I joke with Steve, they probably now have him as the poster boy down there. He's come graduate at St. Francis and you'll get a job. It's been great. Steve, when I think of Steve, I think Steve is what you want out of a city employee. He's loyal, he's trustworthy, he's very competent, he's always reliable, always willing to do whatever you need. And what I mean that is, I remember one time when I first became the superintendent director and I was sweating everything and I couldn't sleep at night. I went to go look at Facebook. And I'm like, I knew nothing about Facebook. This was 7, 8 years ago. And somebody posted something on there and it was spelled wrong and it was a bad word. And I called Steve up at like 4:30 in the morning. I think he was shocked. I said, Steve, you gotta change it. And I'm like, Bart's gonna be calling me in the morning. There's gonna be confidence on there. And he goes, okay, I'll take care of it. That was Steve. I knew he'd answer the phone. I knew he changed it. And the last thing I would say about Steve is, I know we have a slogan in the city that says, the city of Yorkville, it's a river in its heart. Steve has the city of Yorkville in his heart. He cares more about the city than anyone I've ever met. He's been a great employee. It's been a great partnership working with you the last 10 years. I hope we have many more years to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next here? Jim, do you have some people? Jim's very well.
Absolutely. Chris,
John?
Oh, here. First of all.
Thank you. Thank you for your service. So Chris is a patrol officer with the police department. Chris is here with his wife Shelley and his two children, Aiden and Austin, and his father-in-law Jim. I had to write their names down. My name's the same, so we're good. Chris comes to us from the Office of Veterans Affairs back in 2014. He served in the United States Army, so he is a military veteran. Thank you for your service. Since he's been with the Yorkville Police Department for the last 5 years, he has been very active in his career. He's a field training officer. He's a officer in charge of our OIC program. So when a supervisor is not on duty, Chris acts as that supervisor, which is awesome. He's a firearms instructor, soon to be taser instructor, and he's a member of ILEAS Region 3 Mobile Field Force since 2016, which is a lot. So in 5 years, that's pretty awesome. He received back in 2015 a life-saving award for CPR and AED use on an individual who had a heart attack. The day-to-day functions of what an officer goes through, he's the epitome of what you want in an officer. I'm new here, but I can tell you I see him every day. Every time I see him, he's got a smile on his face, and I love talking to him. So thank you for your service. Appreciate it. And here is your certificate.
Come, yeah, take a phone. There you go. Come on. They told us you were.
Boys know how to do it.
Alive.
Geez, I don't want to break that.
No.
Oh, the last one here is for Shelley Augustine. Oh my God. And I've known her since probably for 10 years, since we graduated from high school, right? Well, actually, you graduated with my sister, so 11 years ago, that might have been. No, you can do it. You're doing fine. That's outstanding. How are you?
I'd like to welcome the additional staff and their family and friends that are with us this evening. Tonight we recognize an individual for 10 years of service with the city. Shelley Augustine started as a part-time employee at the Yorkville Library in 2006 and became a full-time employee on January 4th, 2009. She's the Director of Adult Services and a member of the management team. I tend to want to refer to Shelley as an office steward of the Yorkville Library. Don't worry, I cleared it with her before. I said she was Martha Stewart. She's the staff.
I said, I'm a president.
She's the staff liaison to our Threads group, which is a knitting, crochet, quilting, sewing group, and often leads classes in making crafts such as wreaths made from old books, among other programs. She's so talented in any assignment that she takes on. She's responsible for coordinating the writers group, the men's book club, the ladies lunch group, just to name a few, as well as the excellent monthly programs that we conduct at the library within a very, very limited budget. She also manages our website and health relations. She's the staff liaison to the Friends of the Library and offers staff support, which is invaluable during the mini golf tournament as well as the annual book sale. In 2017, she served along with Dixie DeBoer as the interim director after Michelle Pfister retired as library director. It's obvious to those of us that know her that she's a devoted employee that loves her job and and is a significant part of her life. She's always upbeat and optimistic to her coworkers and the public, and she's just fun to be around. I personally want to thank her for her help during my first 2 years as library director. We are so fortunate to have Shelley Augustine as an employee of the library, and today we recognize and thank her for her 10+ years of service to the library and this wonderful Yorkville community. Get more of those.
You're shy.
It's been a long time, hasn't it? I've known her since probably, well, see, when did you graduate? 2005, I think? And I graduated 2006, right? That's right. And your husband was what, 2004, right? Maybe a generation off, but whatever. That's awesome. Well, thank you all, and I don't know if I've had any interactions with Officer, which is probably a good thing. But the other two, even before I became mayor, I had interactions with them, whether it was the library with my kids or whether it was the parks, and staff was always friendly. So I appreciate that very much, because that's one thing I must be with all of the public is friendly. And if there's anything they want to give you grief about, just point in my direction. So thank you all for your service. And you can stick around or you can leave. Hey, if you're bored, want to go home, that's fine. I get it. Okay, I understand. See.
I remember that it was a library board meeting.
I can give you a presentation at the next meeting over there, and then you just, oh, I gotta go. Okay, we are on to
I don't know those rules.
public hearings. Do we have no public hearing today? Okay, citizen comments on agenda items. Do we have any citizens who'd like to speak on the agenda? None? Okay. Consent agenda? None? Minutes for approval? Are there minutes in there? None, okay. I didn't see them listed, but maybe I missed. Okay, bill payments for approval. Payments for these amounts. I'm looking for a motion for $838,299.33 for vendors, and for payroll, $401,340.45, for a grand total of $1,239,639.78.
So moved. Second.
Vote, Milszewski. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Buckhauser.
Aye.
Charulis.
Aye.
Transier.
Aye.
Clocher.
Aye.
Readers.
Aye.
Koch.
Aye.
Milszewski.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Very nice, thank you so much. Next item, mayor's report. We have the cannabis zoning restrictions, and as we've discussed the last couple meetings, we're gonna keep this on there until we finalize some action. The first thing though is the zoning, and staff and myself have discussed this a little bit, and Christie, you have some recommendations that, I guess it was after we discussed it, but we're really good, we want to parallel the medicinal, is that correct?
In some ways, we're parallel the medicinal, but medicinal had a different setback.
Okay.
Since it was 2,500.
Oh, it's 25, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Okay. So who wants to, Art, Christie, you want to lead off of that?
Sure.
Thank
So,
you.
As we talked about, in 2014, we did the medicinal, and the medicinal had identified the manufacturing district as the best location for a special use. And it, since the expansion of the Cannabis Act, and just recently, they have allowed cities to provide reasonable regulatory provisions for time, place, manner, and number of establishments. We can also set minimum distances, we just talked about with the medicinal, and then we can also encourage more setbacks for sensitive uses such as schools, parks, religious institutions, require special use process. So that's what we're recommending. I can go through some of the highlights of what we're recommending. As a reference, we did research other communities and what they were doing. Some have decided to opt out, which is also an option in the city. Some have decided to adopt Some have decided to adopt as a special use, and some have decided to adopt as an R permitted use for the dispensaries. There are 6 types of cannabis establishments that are identified in the Act. One being a craft grower, and there's the cultivation center, the dispensary, the infuser, the processing, and the transporting organization. So staff's recommendation is to have all of these uses as special uses, and each would have its own particular zoning district that it would be allowed. For general purposes, most of them are going to be allowed as a special use in the manufacturing district. The dispensary, it has the ability to be a special use in only the B3 district, and the cannabis craft grower and cultivation would be a special use in the ag district as well as a manufacturing district. The proposed distances that we're offering up, we did look at the Illinois Municipal League's recommendations, and some of that language we've incorporated, some of the language that other communities have adopted we've incorporated, and then we looked at some additional conditions. So for the craft grower, we're looking at 2,500 feet, and that would be from the property line of any pre-existing public, private school is not for, home, public parks and religious institutions. That does not include commercial trade schools, because those are also permitted in the B3 district as well as some of the other manufacturing districts. We are looking at the 2,500 foot for resident, 2,500 foot for residential, and then the craft growers can be located co-mingling with a dispensary or an infuser, so we'll get into that a little bit later. The cultivation center, again, the distance recommended is 2,500 feet. The dispensary, we're recommending 1,000 foot, and that's again from the property line of any pre-existing residential or school or park or religious institution. And that 1,000 foot also has another criteria with it. With the size of the dispensary, we're maxing it out at 5,000 square feet. And we are also saying that these types of uses cannot have a drive-through facility. They cannot utilize an e-commerce delivery service platform, and that's also supported by the police as well. And that they have to have at least 75% of their gross floor area dedicated to the sale. So then they'll leave about 25% dedicated to storage. Infusers are the same, 2,500 feet for the setbacks, and the processors as well as the transporting facilities will be 2,500 as well. There are a few other conditions we are recommending, that there be no more than one of each type of organization permitted in the city, that the times of operation would be 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. during the week and on Saturdays, and then 12 to 5 on Sundays. No on-premise consumption would be permitted, and we're also recommending signage criteria. The signage criteria would have dispensaries limited to one wall sign. And then we would have no electronic message boarding for this type of use, and no imagery that's related to the cannabis and user level. Other than that, we have established some application criteria that we will be reviewing, as well as some standards, because it is a special use. So in addition to our original special use standards, we would include a couple of more standards that are specific to this type of use. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but staff is seeking some direction to move forward with a public hearing on this before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Frieders?
I just had a couple questions. As far as the infuser operation, I was trying to find a good example or something that could be kind of applicable to Yorkville. And I know that even some of the large cultivators are only doing the infusion, a very, very small portion of their facility, because you don't need much. I mean, double boiler, a hood, maybe an oven, whatever. So in my opinion, coming from a guy who lives near 3 or 4 relatively vacant strip malls that used to have restaurants, is the infuser something where they wouldn't need 5,000 square feet? They could potentially occupy a 700 to a 1,700 to maybe a 2,900 square foot strip mall facility that used to be a restaurant. Because if they're just doing cooking, why would we relegate them only to areas where, if you look at the map for the 2,500 square feet, I mean, we're basically asking someone to build something from the ground up, which in my opinion, if we have this new potential to develop small business, and I understand that there's already, big pharma or big weed, whatever you want to call it, but the idea to be approachable in the potential to open up a new business in a new lane, so to speak, as far as what's now legal. Would it make sense to allow an infuser of a smaller scale into a B3 kind of location because they're going to be using B3 type equipment? And whether or not that infuser is part of a dispensary that actually sells the product that they're infusing or not, it seems almost like what we're doing is we're setting this up so that nobody can take advantage of the fact that Yorkville could potentially be welcoming businesses of this sort. So when I look at 2,500 square feet, it's more than a half mile. And that's kind of right around a half mile, whatever. But it seems to me that, yeah, like an M1, A1 operation for a cultivation, they're not going to be right behind the house. But then I look at Beaver Street, we've got 4 or 5 vacant buildings back there and a great manufacturing area right off of 47, and all of it's grayed out because it's not 2,500 square feet. But I know from physically being in some of these operations that most of them operate, you wouldn't even know it. Their technology, their fencing, all of their entire operation is kind of buttoned up so that you wouldn't even know what was going on unless they had a huge sign, which we have ordinances against. So from my perspective, looking at both of the idea that we only want one per for the entire city, and then was it 1,000 square feet for the dispensary and then 2,500 for everything else?
1,000 linear feet.
Okay, linear feet, sorry. So and I had asked Aaron and Bart to help me out with kind of visualizing what a 500 linear foot buffer would look like. But from my perspective, if this is something that any Joe can raise some money with some family, maybe get a loan and can open up a retail dispensary, they don't need much more than 700 to 1,000 square feet. And if they have 1,000 square feet and 700 of it is their showroom, and only 300 in the back or so is their actual storage, they're going to have security, they're going to have 24/7 video footage, all that other stuff that we kind of hope that they're going to have. But to relegate them to areas where they have to literally build from the ground up, sounds like we're creating the zoning code, or we're following the medicinal zoning code to make sure that nobody really takes advantage of it, because who has that type of capital right now? So looking at all of this, I totally agree with starting somewhere. We started with the parallel with the medicinals. I remember that conversation a few years ago. Like, there were people that were outraged that the state even allowed that. Well, the future's kind of catching up with us, and we have no choice but to make a decision. But in my position, we've got a lot of open property as far as in the M1 area. So is it possible to not only shrink those linear feet boundaries that we have, those buffer zones, but is it possible to actually just say, if you're an M1, you are allowed to do this type of like cultivation operation? Because when I look at beaver and deer and badger and all the way back there, all of those are perfect for this type of business. But because they are, whether adjacent to a street which contains a home or a kitty corner from a church, we're not allowed to escort these folks who are basically ready to invest in Yorkville in their own businesses. We can't offer them prime real estate. They have to start from the ground up. Why would we even pass anything in the first place if we're gonna make them have to spend millions as opposed to a couple $100,000? So I'm torn with the whole idea that, yes, it's gonna be legal for recreational use. Yes, we have the power to incorporate our own zoning opinions, but if we're not gonna make it hospitable and advantageous, it almost seems like it's kind of not even worth discussing. So from the dispensary side of things, if we're talking about retail sales, we've got strip malls everywhere with 1, 2, 3, 5 open lots on it. So if it's possible, yeah, I understand that you want to start with one, but I can think of 4 different zones in Yorkville that could potentially have a dispensary or retail location. Not that they would all jump for it. But you've got west on 34, by Target. You've got the center of town, 3447. You've got downtown, and then you've got south side. So that's 4 areas where if you look at the map, there are already strip malls in there. There are already available places, and all they would really need is a lease, a license, some security, and some inventory, and they can legitimately open business as soon as it's available. Like, I know that we have to kind of catch up with the demand, but if we're going to be hospitable to these types of businesses, we should be hospitable, or they're going to go to Aurora where they're asking for 6 licenses for the dispensary retail side. So it's not that we have to be pass something just to pass it, which is kind of how the medicinal parallel to me feels. But we do have to think about this in terms of whether you like it or not, this is reality. But then also when I look at the number of alcohol-based businesses we have around town, understanding the health differences between the two, and how the people who are more angry at the fact that I'm open to this type of conversation are the ones that I see at the bars. So I'm wondering, maybe it would be easier if we just kind of backed up and tried to parallel this with the liquor code and say, okay, you can have it right next to a church, because that's where a liquor store is.
Any other comments?
I know in some of these outlet malls, we have tobacco sales, so, and I'm thinking on the south side, tobacco and liquor store, and that's a good mall, so, yeah, I can see where your point is there. The other thing I was wondering is, how does it work, because at the IML conference, they mentioned about you could actually, probably gonna be able to order online. The only thing will be is you'll have to go to the dispensary to pick up your order. That's what they were talking about there, so, I didn't know if everything's good with that.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily care about the online ordering and personal pickup. Because that could be initiated over the phone or on, through email, whatever the business wants to do. We just didn't want to facilitate e-delivery of the product.
Other comments? Mr. Funkauser?
Going back and forth on what the setback numbers are, I do think it's over restrictive in that form. I'm not saying that I'm for or against it right now, I'm still getting through this, but looking at what we have, knowing how we can allow an M1 use right next to a residential development, I am more inclined to loosen restrictions. After seeing what has come about with medical cannabis, the uses and how that they have worked in their neighborhoods, and there are studies that show that they have not created massive crime where they're at. I'm inclined to want to drop these numbers from 2,500 and 1,000, bring them down. I'm not saying having a zero setback from residential or having a zero setback from schools and parks, but I think that a significant reduction. I'm looking at 500 feet from parks and schools, and then 250 feet from residential. That's kind of where I'm at. So it's a big difference from what it is, but looking at some of the other communities that are going to be around us, what they're looking at, what they're proposing or have proposed, I think it's more in line with what's going to be acceptable and what's, if we want to say, business friendly, if that's the way we want to go, if we want to accept these as a business in our community. I just think that it's over restrictive.
Are you saying that on all the uses? Because there's several different categories listed.
Right, and because I know we've got 1,000-foot buffer for dispensary, and I think if I'm correct, it's the other ones are all 2,500 foot.
Correct.
Honestly, I'd be 250 foot and 500 feet across the board on all of them.
Okay. Joel? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the Joel and Ken.
Are they gonna be allowed, is there gonna be businesses that are allowed to deliver?
No.
Not yet.
Well, our recommendation.
No, I'm just saying in the state.
Yes, yes, there are transfer, yes.
I know for a fact, 'cause I've seen their trucks in town, there's a produce company delivering produce in town, and I built their cooler in O'Hare. So if you don't, they'll be more than willing to deliver that here.
Yeah, 'cause I think the delivery people get licensed through the state.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I guess the question then is, would we be able to prohibit somebody from ordering and having it delivered from somewhere outside of Yorkville? I think
I
that
would
answer is
not
no.
think so.
Right.
But we can prohibit the existing retailers in town from
We would
posting
only
it.
be able to restrict our own businesses.
Right. So if we're like against it, it's still gonna end up here, and they'll just deliver it. If they're delivering produce from O'Hare.
Ken?
The other thing that kind of goes along with that is, there's these infused beverages. So are we gonna, I don't think Jewel and those places like that are, these are in the Blacktop area, right? So are they gonna be allowed to carry those beverages in their stores? Or how's that gonna all play out?
To the best of my knowledge, an infused or distributor of infused cannabis would be required to have a license, just like any dispensary. That's part of the dispensing.
The products currently sold in the market right now are not
Correct.
cannabis regulated products.
They're
They're
TA.
CBD that you get.
There's-
Correct, but they're not regulated under the recreational cannabis laws. So they would still continue to be able to sell those.
Any other questions?
I
Comments?
just had a quick question. On the sheet that shows the different, let me get to the page. Sheet that breaks down each type of the 6, and then it has the use category and then the zoning districts. The organization or transporter didn't have anything marked. Is that,
It's a continuation, it's
oh, it's adult use cannabis transporting organization or transporter?
correct.
No Jason Statham. Okay, is that something where they don't take their work home, do they? You could literally be a transport organization with a truck in your driveway, because you don't ever have things overnight. It's a A to B type thing.
Do not know, I just know they're licensed through the state.
Because like, this is the type of thing where I'm looking at this from a, if I'm a 25-year-old guy and I've been dying to start my own business, and this is an opportunity, and I kind of understand the lingo, the use, all the vernacular, that's something where if I don't need a facility and all I need is a truck and insurance, maybe that's something where we're not saying, no, you have to have an address out of an M1 location.
Well, that is what we're saying. So if you are a transporter and you have your vehicle and you're in Yorkville, you would have to be in one district to store your vehicle.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Funkhauser?
What's the logic between just the one license or one per type? What's the staff's rationale?
So we are allowed to cap that, and that was to, there's only 47 licenses that are going to be given out in our particular area. It's not like we're going to get multiple ones, so this is a trial. This can also be amended if the interest is there.
It gives us more control too.
Initially.
over decisions.
All right.
But this is like a liquor license where when somebody comes forward and says, hey, I know you already got one, but can I apply for one? That's where we can talk about it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that with the people who want the machines.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you think about, we got alcohol, gambling, and cigarettes. And then we've got reefer. And all of those have requirements to, acquire a liquor license to get the gambling, get the license to sell the tobacco, and they can basically advertise to their heart's content. Light up signs, OMG liquor signs across from where we have, celebrations of war veterans and stuff like that. And now we're gonna, I'm totally for the, keeping the leaves off of stuff like that. But I also think that if we wanted to take advantage of this new business, not for tax revenue, but to allow other people to go ahead and start their own business and to have another business in town, I still think picking 4 areas where there is none, there's plenty of open space, and saying that's where you can go makes a lot of sense. And the 250 and 500 recommendation that Alderman Funkhauser said, that's a lot closer to reality than 2,500 square feet. I mean, the facilities that are required for manufacturing are not conducive to the retail locations that I'm referring to for the dispensaries. So they will kind of work their way out. But I look at Beaver because I go over there for Parks and Rec meetings all the time, and there's awesome spaces there. And I don't want to rule that area out just because, on the other side, there's Colonial Parkway. Well, all of those people have lived behind a fire station, lived behind a dairy, and I've heard those trucks run at the dairy. They're way louder than anything that's going to be coming out of a cultivation center. So I just think we should kind of look at this realistically and go, what type of impact is it going to have on the quality of life of people that are there? Because of the fact that they're not going to be adding, diesel fumes and trucks coming at 2 and 3 in the morning and these nonstop deliveries. I don't want to make this so restrictive that nobody comes, but I also don't think that it's a bad idea to say, yeah, we're receptive to the change because we understand that it's going to change with or without us. And I think that's where we kind of show that we do have a backbone. We're not saying, hey, let's zone this so that we make sure that nobody comes. That way we can avoid the conversation. No, this is a conversation. It's reality. Let's make it conducive to actual business thriving as opposed to putting them in a spot that is, there's no power, there's no sewer, there's no gas, and they have to go from the ground up. That just doesn't seem like a smart move.
Mr. Funkhauser?
Just on the signage, it's a double standard, I think. You could have a cigarette shop that has a cigarette and smoke coming off of it, but you can't have that for a marijuana facility. I mean, somebody can come in and open a Bob Marley branded restaurant with a marijuana leaf on it. Do on it whatever you want, but you can't do it for a facility that sells this. I do think there is kind of a double standard and it's not consistent. It's almost censorship on this one. I understand what we're doing. I don't really care to have those kind of displays out there, but I think it does kind of censor the product and again, over restrictive if you ask me. Not that I am in favor of it, but I do think it just comes across as over restrictive.
So are you suggesting there should be signage up?
There,
Go ahead.
the law addresses advertising.
The state law.
And so, to a certain extent, that's taken out of our hands. There can be no advertising. Is a sign advertising, you tell me? No, within 1,000 feet from any school, primary, secondary, daycare center, so.
So it's a generic text,
so-
it's a
yeah,
dispensary.
So I guess what I'm saying,
Wait.
if you reduce the distance for purposes of establishing a dispensary.
They're set by state standard as to what they can do, but if you're outside of that, certain areas have greater permissions on what they can do for signage. Correct.
No, you can't, no matter what, you can't do it. I guess what I'm saying is if we reduce it to the numbers that you've suggested, we couldn't have signs because it might be within 1,000 square feet.
It just, it's a basic generic sign, is what you're saying, is that
You would, yeah, it would just say, you know,
dispensary or whatever.
Chris Funkhauser cannabis store.
Yeah.
That's it,
John's Dispensary. John's.
that's it.
Two apostrophes.
Yeah.
But I also know that some of the products, their branding is restricted. You can't have the 5-leaf. You can't
Correct.
have depictions of smoke, and that's on the actual product. So I mean, we're going about this in a way where we know it's going to happen. We kind of have to tiptoe into it, and that's like when we started talking about the medicinal. I don't know if you guys remember this, but the quote in the paper was, "Oh yeah, Kendall Bud," like that would actually happen. Number one, that was nowhere close to being allowed as far as zoning is concerned. But even those conversations, just about medicinal for that dozen or so afflictions, the conversation has kind of dovetailed off of that into all these areas where we're worried about something that's going to happen regardless. But the one thing that I do know, and the last time we talked about pot here, I was actually in a car with a woman who worked for a dispensary, and then we toured a cultivation center, and the person who owned the cultivation center could not speak more highly of the state of Illinois as far as how they are setting their quality standards, which to hear a person like me, hear a person like that compliment the state, tell me more. Well, the fact that all of the products that are going to be coming through Illinois, no pesticides, they have to know what type of THC is in them, they have to know the CBD type that's in there, they have to know what that type of THC turns into. All of these things that they have to do, at least we can know that we're not going to be getting the black market product, which, you know, we're now learning what black market, nicotine and the vapes can do. So it's like, there's a lot that we can learn from the fact that the state of Illinois took their time. And I remember joking about the IML conferences, why are we talking about quality? If the pot sucks, nobody will buy it, plain and simple. Well, it was a different aspect of quality. It was making sure that the people who are using it aren't inhaling things that could potentially damage them outside of the actives and inside of the content that they're actually looking to purchase. So I think we have an opportunity here to actually make Yorkville hospitable to business, not just zone to zone and keep them out of our backyard. That's not how I want to operate.
Other comments? So, Mr. Funkhauser, you're the one who's actually put forward an actual proposal. So I want to understand your proposal. There's been a lot of talk, but no specifics, other than yours.
I had specifics.
You're right in the manufacturing industry. But I'm trying to figure out the setbacks. I've heard people have reservations about. These are the only specific ones. The 250 and 500, what is it you're saying specifically?
I would say that 250 feet from residential for all classes, 500 feet from parks and schools for all classes.
Are you going to support that? If it comes forward, we need 5 votes. You're the one proposing it. I'm going to ask you right now, point blank, are you going to support that?
There's a lot to it. I mean, I can't say that, John. I mean, I'm putting forward this recommendation. This is what I feel is appropriate.
So
if the zoning,
those changes, you'll support it?
On zoning, I'd probably support it, depending on how we come up with everything else. Yeah, I would support 250 and 500.
Okay. Anyone else have thoughts on that number? Those numbers?
Well, I recommended 500, but I like his shorter version.
Okay.
Also increasing the number of retail licenses to 4.
We'll be lucky to get 1.
Not my problem.
Yeah, well, we can deal with that when it comes forward. Joe?
Keep it to one, Kaiser's suggestion.
The 250 and 500?
Yeah, just
Just 1? Jackie?
I like the shorter distance, and I'm with Alderman Frieders because I
when you talk about the industrial park, you know, that's what I always thought, why isn't something like this going in the industrial park if we're gonna do it? You know, it's away from everybody, it's,
Weren't you talking about from industrial, more for the infusers, you said?
Everything. I think the infusers would be fine in B3 because they're using kitchen equipment.
Okay.
so if the 2,500 feet impedes us going into the industrial park, then I would be supported being less distant, less of a distance,
Okay.
so that that could be used.
It definitely does.
Can I follow up with something?
Sure.
Alder Freeze? Joel, you had mentioned infusers, but you were thinking in B3 as a special use, one that it's not in right now. So would you like that added as a
Yeah.
special use in B3?
Absolutely.
Because that's gonna, with the proposal I have on the setbacks, B districts are gonna come available.
Yeah.
That would be an additional change.
And that was a specific, like, if they're using kitchen equipment, put a kitchen equipment in an industrial building, that's just, I mean, just think about the grease trap and the exhaust. I mean, that's 135 grand right there. If they're moving into a vacant restaurant that's been vacant for a while, now they've solved two problems. One, they filled a vacant property, and two, they've taken the one license that would have otherwise gone to an industrial use. And then it's, now you've got a Yorkville business who's an infuser and can fit in a facility of that size.
Seaver, any thoughts?
You know where I'm coming from.
I just want to give everyone up.
I cannot support anything.
Dan?
I agree with Alderman Funkhauser. The way it's done right now, it's just too restrictive. No one would want to open up a business. The setbacks that's proposed right now, so I think you reduce it to what Mr. Funkhauser says. As it relates to the licenses, I can see limiting them in order to prevent 50 or 60 of them from opening, but I don't see that ever being a problem given the marketplace in our community. But I kind of prefer let the market decide. Don't let the government say, we're going to cut it off at this. But I know it's something that can be addressed later. So if we allow for two, and then if someone comes in and says, I want to open another one, we can reopen that door, you know, if we see fit.
That's a good point.
What's that, Ken?
That was a good point there, that we can add more down the road.
So the state, I think, has 1,500 foot minimum distance between dispensaries.
Yes.
The other thing is, and I understand the comment of letting the market decide, but I think Christie or somebody said it, there's, what is there gonna be, 45 or 75 licenses?
47.
To start out with. Yorkville's not gonna get two. I mean, if you have a legalized monopoly, why would you go where someone else has legalized monopoly? You just wouldn't do it, so.
What if?
Oh, what if we can address that?
What about the 5,000 square foot?
The 5,000 square foot, I think is that a standard set by the state?
No.
The initial? I thought there was initial 5,000 square foot maximum, and then they can increment it to 3,000 square foot.
No, there is no.
I'm sorry?
That's
For the grow, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew that, I heard that.
We applied it just to the dispensary.
That's a big dispensary.
Yeah.
5,000
Well, we
square
have
foot.
to take into consideration that 75% of it has to be utilized for the dispensing use, so you can get people in and out in an orderly manner, and then the additional space could then be used for storage.
But that's a maximum.
That's our maximum.
Yeah, it's not saying it has to be that big.
Correct. That's-
Correct, that's a maximum. So back to that question, are we okay right now with the 5,000 square foot maximum?
For a grow facility?
For dispensary.
Dispensary.
Sure.
Over here on this side? Seaver? That's fine, I just want to include everyone in the conversation. Jackie, you'll get the 5,000.
You said that's a maximum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Funkhauser, 5,000 square foot maximum dispensary?
It's like a mall. Like, that's a lot of pot.
It's a max, again, it's a max.
Max size.
Yeah, not a minimum. You have bounce houses in there too or something.
Oh, yes. See?
Buy it, bounce
That was
house.
good.
You are
That
an
was good.
entrepreneur.
That was fair.
I mean, if they can do it in 5,000 square feet.
Oh, they can.
They can't do it in 5,000.
Right
That's
now,
a
they're
lot
doing
of
it in
room,
trunks.
but I don't think any dispensary is gonna need that much room, so.
Okay.
They're- Yeah.
So we're okay with that. So does that give you better direction then for what
Yeah.
we're setting for?
Yeah, so the only change to the staff recommendation that I got a tally on is changing the radius of the different uses to 500 feet from parks and schools only. Churches or, they're like four different,
That
okay.
entire group
Yeah.
of, yeah.
But then only 250 feet from residential. And that's, again, regardless of whether it's unincorporated or incorporated, or it's in Plano or somewhere else. Upper maps as a result of that. If there were any other changes, they still can be made at a later date. We still have to do public hearings at PTC in November before we have city council discussion from our.
Infuser and B3.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
There were a couple comments on that, but you had ran around the table on that.
Okay,
So
well, let's do that then. We know there's one for the infusion, I think two. Were you okay with that?
Yeah.
Dan, what about the infusers in B3?
I don't have a problem with what Alderman Fried
Okay.
was saying.
Okay.
We'll make that change then.
Okay.
Nodding heads was.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
No, Steve doesn't.
Okay, anything else on that? We'll keep it on the agenda. And we still have,
If you want to address the increase from 1 to maybe 2, 3, 4 dispensary licenses.
no.
Okay.
I still think 4 is adequate to start, and then we'll go into 4.
We'll bring it forward with one, you can do what you want at a later point.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay,
Where's my agenda?
where's your agenda?
Yeah, I lost it. I lost it.
Here, you want this?
I got it.
Okay, next we have the CMAP LPA grant program application, industrial feasibility study. Bart, is this you? I know we've spoken to this a couple times.
Yep, we've applied for a couple other LTA grants over the years and been successful. This is one that we had as part of our city council goal action plans from a couple years ago to do a manufacturing industrial business gap type analysis and to figure out what businesses and industries we should be targeting for recruitment in our manufacturing and industrial facilities. I will note, there's no penalty if we apply and say, no thanks, cost ends up being too high. There is a 20% guideline commitment, I don't think it's hard to pass, within the grant program. And so we estimated our cost to be about $15,000. We won't know until the award is actually done and we get into the negotiations what that price will be. But that's something we can authorize at the staff level. We think it would be worth it, make it work if we need to. So this one does not require city council authorization. It helps if you sign off on it, I suppose. But we do want your feedback. If you say that this is not the direction that we want to go anymore for our past goal action plans, we will not submit it.
Comments, questions?
I support 100%.
Okay, excellent. Do you want to vote? Bart, would you prefer a vote or does that not matter?
Sure, if somebody wants to make a
Is
motion.
that a motion?
for the-
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
By Mr. Funkhauser, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Okay, Public Works Committee report.
No report.
EDC report,
No report.
Public Safety Committee report,
No report.
Admin Committee report,
No report.
Park Board, we have some exciting stuff from the Park Board. We have an ordinance amending the liquor regulations allowing possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages at the Bristol Bay Regional Park. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Second, I heard the Frieders and Coke. And Tim, do you want to talk about this at all?
As explains in the memo, a few years ago, I think in 2016, the city council approved allowing out at Bridge Park certain dates for the adult softball league to be able to bring their own alcohol and consume alcohol on site during just the adult softball games. We've had a lot of calls recently with the new sand volleyball court up at Bristol Bay, if we could do something similar with an adult volleyball league there. So we brought the proposal to the park board, they passed it unanimously, and we're here tonight asking for city council approval.
Questions, comments? Jackie?
I'm just making an observation. We only want to have one place that can, one license, but we have alcohol everywhere in Yorkville.
You can vote no, I don't care.
I'm just saying, I think we're very
That isn't
hypocritical.
what you meant.
It's just okay to have it in a park, but we don't want anything else near the park. And we should have our whole downtown as alcoholic establishments. I'm just saying. I'm not a drinker. I don't care if you drink, but it seems like we're a little bit hypocritical here. My observation.
It's fair. You can still vote no. Mr. Funkhauser?
I do concur, but also Bridge Park is not attached to any residential, is not directly attached to residential neighborhoods. Bridge, that was a big difference when we looked at that for me. Looking at Bristol Bay Park, it is actually immediately attached to a single family, and also it's going to at some point maybe have townhomes over there. But it's right next to a residential neighborhood. I don't think, it's not what I would prefer, so I'm not going to support this one.
It's fine. Now, just to address that, though, the volleyball pits are not right adjacent to the.
They're not, but it is
They're
part of
substantial.
the park. It is
That is true, yeah.
part of Kansas Park.
Mr. Frieder?
Well, since there were other leagues in town that were at places that served alcohol, and some of them may actually be sponsored by some alcohol companies or distributors, the request wasn't based on a, hey, we should be able to drink everything. It was more on a, hey, we're doing this organized thing that we used to do and spend money with the private business. Now they're spending money potentially with the city. And I think this is an example of, if they're gonna do it and we don't allow it, all we're doing is setting them up to fail because a business in town went out of business where they used to be able to do the same thing. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who bends to every person's whim, but this is one where it's a league, it's organized, and they also know if they're the ones who came forward and asked for permission and something goes wrong, we now have the people who are responsible for any issue because we know in documentation that they are the ones that are organizing this type of thing. So from my perspective, it's always easier to permit and kind of monitor than it is to do an outright no and you know they're going to do it anyway, and then it's a whole, you're setting people up to fail. So this is one where just because of how successful the Bridge Park thing is, and I know from people playing volleyball that if you're playing sand volleyball, most of the time you end up throwing your beverage away because it's filled with sand. So this is just going to boost the economy in another way. But I support it.
Mr. Blocher?
We've had plenty of alcoholic beverages at Town Square Park actually provided and used by the city, so it's directly across the street from my parents' house and surrounded by a neighborhood.
Okay. Other comments? We'll do a roll call, please.
Blocher,
Aye.
Frieders,
Aye.
Poe,
Aye.
Belshewski,
Aye.
Funkhauser,
It's hypocritical.
Nay.
Chirulis,
Aye.
Transier,
Hey,
motion carries.
Thank you very much. Okay. The next thing we have, oh, I marked that on the wrong spot. We have EZC 2019-09 and EZC 2019-23, the Downtown Form-Based Code and Streetscape Master Plan. We have the ordinance amending the Yorkville zoning ordinance by adding downtown overlay district and the ordinance approving the Streetscape Master Plan for the downtown overlay district. Let's just talk about it before we have a motion, make sure everyone's concerns are addressed. So we had some concerns that were raised last meeting, and Christie, you were able to address those. If you go ahead, please.
Sure, there's 5 concerns that were brought up that were addressed. In the streetscape master plan, we classified all the streets on South Main Street as B Street residential, so that's done. And then we changed the map that Alderman Funkhauser brought up with the city-owned properties to make them public, quasi-public identified. In the form-based code, we again updated the street classification for the Main Street properties. We, per Alderman Funkhauser's comments, updated the maximum building height so they're accurate to what the maximum building height could be in the particular districts. And then the last one, I amended all of the sections that refer to building types to talk about corner clearance, and that the mayor brought up about corner clearance, particularly on the parcel of the city on North Avenue. So it addresses all buildings that would be in a corner clearance situation that they have to be set back, so that we can have that 25-foot triangle.
Excellent. Questions, comments? Mr. Funkhauser?
That's the comments we had.
Anyone else? Ready to vote on this tonight? I saw Mr. Frieder's nod his head. Was that a motion to approve? And Mr. Koch was second? Excellent. Any further discussion?
Please. No, please.
I do have one thing. I just want to thank the staff, and Christie in particular. We've been going back and forth on some of these things. We had a couple battles. And she was very calm and receptive, and every time I had something, she addressed it, and I appreciate it. So thank you. Okay, roll call, please.
Frieders.
Aye.
Koch.
Aye.
Bilshuski.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Chirulis.
Aye.
Transier.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excellent, thank you very much. Next, we have BZC 2019-21 and EDC 2019-74. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance, the final plat, Menards Commercial Commons 7th Edition re-subdivision?
Second.
I have Frieders and Milszewski, and Christie, could you give just a brief summary on that, please?
Sure, the 37-acre parcel has 2 lots, they need to adjust the interior lot line so that they don't encroach with the addition of this new driveway connected to the building.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Aye.
Bilshuski.
Aye.
Funkhauser.
Aye.
Chirulis.
Aye.
Transier.
Aye.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Frieders.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Okay. And, oh, I'm sorry.
Point of order.
Did we take the prior 2 motions together?
Yeah.
We did, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Anything else on that?
Nothing.
City council report, that's a fair question. City clerk's report? Community and liaison reports? Yes.
Quick one. The gentleman that ran against me for alderman in 2013 passed away last week.
Oh.
I wanted to give a public appreciation for Sam Clements. I grew up with the guy. Yorkville resident, worked for a number of Yorkville businesses, including one of the retirement homes in the south side. Awesome person, and rest in peace, Sam Clements.
Thank you for that. Unfortunate, but appreciate the update. Okay, any other liaison or community reports?
This weekend was the Yorkville Kiwanis Yorktoberfest. Even though it did get a little rain and we did have to cancel a little early, it was a successful event for the organization. It was profitable. We didn't quite hit our target goal of what we wanted to be able to achieve in order to give out all the scholarships that we were planning, but we are very, very close. Very good event. We want to thank the city for the assistance and all the help throughout the activities. Joel, thank you for your very good MC skills out there. It was a fun event. Unfortunately, the rain got the better of it. Boyd Emerson was able to come together and facilitate the bands later up at his place. So it was a good evening, good day altogether. So
Excellent, thank you. I made it for probably an hour and a half or so before the rain started. It was a good time, so thank you. And thanks to the park staff. They always support that even though it wasn't technically ours. They were there. I checked things out Friday afternoon to make sure everything was going smoothly, and they were there helping, so that was good. And I know I'm going to report this to Ms. Milszewski. You could be upset with me for being a hypocrite, but I did consume some wine there, and it was tasty.
See? It's everywhere. Well, if you can drink everywhere, why can't you smoke
Hey, you know
everywhere?
what?
I'm just saying. You get high, you get
Staff
drunk. What's
report.
the difference?
I know Mr. Jensen had something, and I failed. I see it there earlier. You had some great actions by your officers.
Yeah, every day I come into work, I'm impressed with the work that our men and women do. This last weekend, we had a call come out from Sugar Girl to make your own case DUI. And we found the vehicle at the intersection of 47 and Kennedy. The driver was passed out, vehicle was locked up, car is in drive.
Oh my God.
Still, our officers, as the sergeant pulled up, 2 officers actually were holding the car as much as they could from moving into the intersection. intersection. Well, the sergeant pulled up in front, got his bumper right up next to this guy's car, so if he woke up, he wouldn't jerk forward to go into the intersection and cause a crash or himself or someone else. Our officers then got into the vehicle using their equipment, and it turns out the gentleman was having a diabetic incident. So they called the ambulance, and so it was work that was fantastic. So, but I sent that out email to you guys, but thanks for letting us talk about it. It's awesome.
Well, thank you for letting us know. It seems like we have one of these, I don't want to say that specific instance, but something where your officers are doing a great job. It seems like a couple times a week, so
They are.
that's outstanding.
It's an impressive group that you guys hired. It's awesome.
Thank you. Okay, I know you all want to go, but we have something real exciting now. Under Mayor's Report Continued. The fiscal year 2019 audit report. In case you weren't ready to sleep yet. Oh, now we have a couple, not just Rob. We have the auditor here as well.
Wow.
Are you the gentleman we spoke to over the phone?
I sure am.
I didn't know who you were. Now I know.
Name to a face.
So please state your name for the record.
Certainly. My name is Brad Porter. I am here on behalf of Lauterbach and Amon as the audit manager for the city's fiscal year 2019 financial statement audit. And I'm here tonight to present to you the required communication to the board. Thank you all for having me out this evening. I'd also like to give a very special thank you to Rob and his staff who do such a tremendous job year in and year out. This year, above any other year, there was a number of reporting changes that were required to be implemented in this financial report, and they certainly made it look easy. It's always a relief walking in on day one knowing that we're going to have everything that we need to take care of our financial statement audit. So thank you, Rob, and your team. There are three pieces of required communication that I'd like to briefly go over. No worries here. The first is what we call a SAS 114 letter. That will be a document that you will not have in front of you unless it was distributed, but Statement on Auditing Standard number 114 requires us to communicate any disagreements or difficulties that we had encountered over the course of our audit testing, and I'm very happy to report in the body of that letter you will find no such disagreements or difficulties. So again, kudos to the staff that was involved this year. So I'd like to jump right into the comprehensive annual financial report. So if you'd like to follow along as I go, there's a couple of intangibles that I'd like to point out tonight. I know Rob is going to take over after me and go over a lot of the key financial highlights, so I'll kind of shy away from those for the sake of my presentation. If you could please turn to page 9, you will see what appears to look like an award, and that is exactly what that is. That is the Certificate of Achievement Award. That is issued by the Government Finance Officers Association. This award represents the highest form of financial reporting excellence that an entity can receive in the governmental accounting world. So all good things from a financial audit standpoint this year. We will be working hand in hand with Rob and his staff on the application for fiscal year 2019's report as well. These are reported 1 year in arrears as we then need to turn this report over to the GFOA to do their review. So I did want to point out that. If you could turn to page 10 and 11, you should see our Lauterbach and Amon letterhead. This is what we call our independent auditor's report. So in addition to stating your responsibility as management, which is ultimately the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements, we state what our opinion is on the financial statements that we are auditing. That last paragraph there on the bottom of page 10, you will see our opinion paragraph. We have issued an unmodified opinion for fiscal year 2019. And an unmodified opinion is the cleanest form of opinion that you can receive in the governmental world. And what that represents is we feel the financial statements are free from any material misstatement and that there are sound internal controls over the financial reporting function. Moving on to page 12, you will find a section titled the Management Discussion and Analysis. And that is certainly exactly what that section is. It is prepared by management and has a lot of key financial highlights. The reason that I'd like to point this out to you as a board, it is incredibly important to read through. And there are a lot of financial highlights in narrative format. We understand that some of those financial statements that lie behind the management discussion and analysis are not the most easily interpretable or to understand. So I do encourage you to read through this. There's one bullet point there from a financial standpoint that I'd like to point out. That's bullet point number 2. The overall net position figure had increased by $4,615,901, which is approximately 3.3% over the prior year. So net position, I know we're not a business trying to generate profits here, but typically net position is the best measure of financial performance for any given fiscal year. So to see that number increasing is always a good sign. I'd also like to point out on page 137 and 138, you will see a reporting change from our fiscal year 2018 report. The state of Illinois implemented what is known as the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act that seeks to really improve reader transparency regarding grant expenditures. So I'd like to point out that on page 137, you will find a schedule, consolidated year-end financial report, which essentially breaks down each major grant program that is going on within the city's boundaries, whether or not it's state, federal, or a local grant is really what those three columns represent. So we do report those expenditures in this separate schedule this year, and then we also generate a report on internal controls over the grant function, which can be found on page 138. You will see towards the bottom there, we had no material deficiencies or significant weaknesses that we identified regarding the internal controls over financial reporting. So I'd like to just jump over to the management letter real quick. The primary purpose of our management letter is to convey any internal control recommendations or best practices that we see across the industry. I'm very happy to report there were no new current recommendations as a result of our fiscal year 2019 audit procedures. There were 3 prior recommendations that are within this letter that I'd like to provide brief status updates on. Comment number 1 was in regards to funds over budget for the downtown TIF fund. You will see in the status paragraph there that was implemented in fiscal year 2019. So we always keep the comment in here for 1 year to show that the status ultimately has been implemented moving forward. So that it will be removed entirely from the fiscal year 2020 management letter, assuming that that issue didn't arise again. The next comment is regards to GASB 7475, which deals with the reporting of your retiree health benefits. Ultimately, the city sought a third-party actuarial valuation that conducted an analysis of the liability pertaining to your retiree health benefits. And not much else to report on in regards to that. So I know Rob will probably point out some of the liabilities and deferred inflows and outflows associated with that. The third is funds with deficit equity. Ultimately, we are required to disclose anytime a fund has negative net position or a deficit net position, we are required to disclose it in the form of a management letter. Now, it's kind of deceiving that these are SSA and TIF funds that ultimately have not began accumulating tax increment just yet. So I do anticipate that as those funds begin accumulating the tax revenues, that ultimately they will begin to fall off one by one. So
I'd like to follow up with a question on that.
yeah, of course.
And we discussed this the other day,
Yeah.
and Rob, I think, might be interesting too. Specifically those TIF funds, where they're negative over $1 million.
Sure.
How is that funded until that money comes in?
Ultimately, it was funded with transfers from the general fund, which are then being kept on the balance sheet as an asset in the general fund to essentially make the general fund whole. We don't want to reduce the assets if ultimately they're going to be repaid in the future from those funds.
So essentially a receivable?
Correct. You're absolutely correct. So there's a risk.
Cash is actually that much lower.
Correct. It's considered to be non-spendable because the general fund doesn't have that cash on hand. So there's a receivable on the books of the general fund and payables on the books of each of the TIF and SSA funds for that.
But the cash in hand in the general fund is actually that much less.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that concludes my presentation. So
Oh.
I'd be happy to field any questions.
Questions? Comments? Wow, that was easy for you.
All right, I know. I'll turn it over to Rob. He gets to dig into the good stuff. So
Well, thanks.
Thank you for your
sticking around
time.
for that exciting discussion to get to, wasn't it?
All right, good evening. Welcome to our fiscal year 2019 audit overview. Before we delve into financials, I just wanted to mention, Brad already mentioned that this will be the 8th time in a row that we've achieved the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So I'll be working with Brad and his team at Lauterbach and Amon to make it number 9. So I'll keep you posted. We begin our journey into the financials tonight by looking at a brief history of the general fund, 14 years worth. Just to kind of give you a brief perspective of where we've been. We go back to actually before the recession, to fiscal year 2006. At that time, you can see that fund balance is just above, or just below rather, $6 million. A large portion of fund balance at that time, though, consists of bond proceeds. We actually issued a bond back in 2005 for the In-Town Road project. As we move forward into 7 and 8 and the recession hits, we can see that fund balance starts to decline, reflective of the general aggregate condition of the economy. And also we have a looming bad debt in 8 and 9 pertaining to some receivables with developers that ultimately ended up being uncollectible. In fiscal year 2010, we actually wrote off that bad debt. It was $1 million write-off. Caused fund balance in the general fund to drop to about negative $500,000. In fiscal year 2011, due to some cost reduction activities that we engaged in, we were able to cut that deficit in half to about negative $270,000. And in fiscal year 2012, we did some bond refunding to help with cash flow. We also implemented a non-home rule sales tax January the 1st of 2012. So we see that fund balance start to go positive once again to about 1.3 million. And then from there in fiscal year 13, that was the first full year of the non-home rule sales tax. The general economy started to pick up and fund balance jumped all the way up to 4.2 million. We had a bit of a downtick in fiscal year 14 as we closed out the old rec center fund and the municipal building fund. But since fiscal year 2015, we've steadily increased the fund balance position of the general fund. It eclipsed 5 million. In fiscal year ended 2016, by fiscal year ended 2017, we're up at 6.2 million, which actually exceeded our pre-recessionary high. And here at the end of fiscal year 19, the current year, we're right at $6.9 million in the general fund. I just wanted to mention that the white, or the gray tips of the fund balance presentation from fiscal year 13 through fiscal year 19 represents encumbrances or other fund deficits which the general fund supports indirectly. If you go back to fiscal year 13, actually that's not the TIFs, that's the municipal building fund. Actually the TIFs both had positive fund balance at that time. But as we move forward in fiscal year 14, it does become the TIFs due to all the development that's been taking place out at the Countryside TIF and then also with the acquisition of the downtown bank building. So moving forward to fiscal year 19, the current year, that fund deficit is about 1.45 million with a negative equity position about $1 million right now in the downtown TIF due to the acquisition of the bank building and about $450,000 or so in the Countryside TIF. If you look at the bottom of the chart, you can see general fund balance percentage. It's a little bit blurred from here, but I do know that right now we're at 43% when you just take the general fund balance and you compare it against general fund expenditures. Below that is the percent fund balance adjusted, which also includes a negative equity position of the TIFs. Right now that's at 34%, and which is still above our policy threshold of 30%. So again, this just kind of mirrors what we've already talked about. You can see that bond proceeds caused a huge surplus in FY6, FY7 through FY10. We see a deficit position as we spent down those bond proceeds, had the bad debt write-off, and just the general effect of the recession. Beginning in FY12, or excuse me, beginning in FY11, we start to see some surpluses, which begin to rebuild fund balance. And as I mentioned briefly, in FY14, we had that slight deficit to close out the municipal building rec center funds, but since then, since fiscal 15 going forward, we've experienced surpluses in the general fund anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million. So looking at the revenue performance of the major revenue streams of the general fund, I'm happy to report that most of the streams exceeded both budgetary and prior year amounts. The sales tax, well, it's local here, but I call it municipal sales tax, increased by 2.3% over the prior year. Non-home rule sales tax increased by about 1.5%. Utility taxes, which consist of your NICOR gas and your Comet electricity tax, increased by about 6%, aided no doubt by the cold temperatures we had this winter in January and February. The big news though in the general fund is the increases in income tax and local use tax. We did budget income tax to have about a 12% increase based on the results of the special census, which increased our per capita as our population increased from about 17,000 to just over 19,000. But actually it increased 20%, due in part to the special census, but also to an improved aggregate economy. And then also we did receive an allotment in May for March of about $340,000, which was extremely high, probably the highest in the city's history, which helped push us up to just shy of 1.97 million. Our local use tax has been one of the more robust revenues in the general fund over the last several years. That again increased by 22% over the prior year amount, aided in part by the Wayfair decision where online sales are now taxable, and also too just the general prevalence of all the transactions taking place online. Some of the lesser revenues in the general fund, video game tax, it's worth mentioning that it's just one revenue stream that just continues to increase year after year. FY19 showed about a 20% increase, about $25,000 more than the previous year to finish right at $145,000. Excise tax has been on a decline over the last several years as fewer and fewer people are actually using landlines. Increased by about 8% over the last 2 fiscal years. This year it kind of leveled off a bit. It did decrease by about 1.5%, but it was $5,000 or so over budget. And then we have cable franchise fees, which was a little bit over budget by about $10,000, $301,000 versus $290,000 budgeted. Turning to the expenditure side, these are all the functional departments of not only the general fund, but also library, parks and rec, sewer, and water. I'm pleased to report that most of our functional departments were under budget for fiscal year 19. Community development was slightly over budget by about $40,000 as a result of the increased outsourced inspection costs, which resulted from enhanced building and development throughout the city. Building permits this year in the general fund finished at $476,000, which is almost $200,000 more than budgeted. So those additional costs were easily offset by the enhanced revenue position of the general fund. Here's a little snapshot of the performance of the general fund. As you can see, revenues exceeded budgeted amounts by over $750,000 due to better than expected tax, intergovernmental permit, and interest income as well. And then expenditures were $350,000 below budget. Actually, we did $1 million better than we initially thought we would. We initially budgeted a deficit of $763,000. We ended up with an actual surplus of over $380,000. So that actually increases our fund balance in the beginning of the year was $6.496 million. So again, we finish fiscal year 19 with a ending fund balance of $6.879 million. This is our annual slide, just comparing the engineering costs of in-house engineering, which we used to have back in fiscal year 2009, compared to our outsourced function, which we currently have now. You can see it's about $200,000 less to have it outsourced than what we paid in fiscal year 2009, of course, adjusted for inflation. We had about $240,000 in routine engineering and $177,000 for subdivision inspections, which makes up that $420,000 number. In addition, we had about $270,000 in reimbursed development, and then we had a net cost of about $273,000 for engineering costs pertaining to capital projects. So items of note, as we dig a little deeper into the CAFR, you're going to encounter the notes section. You can read about fund balance categories and their amount beginning on page 25. You just wanted to mention that there is a fund balance restriction of $459,000 due to the IMRF levy. In the past, we've actually levied more for IMRF than we've actually spent. So pursuant to GASB 54, we show that amount as restricted. And again, that restriction has been going down several $100,000 every year, so it should be zeroed out within a year or two. Also pensions, very important, and OPEB, as Brad mentioned, OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, namely the retiree benefits. That begins on page 75 in your CAFR. I just want to briefly touch about the two major pension funds here in the city. First of all is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which we're all part of, those of us who are non-sworn, not police. Our total pension liability for IMRF did increase by about 1.8 million. The net position decreased by about 300,000. And our percent funded declined. It was almost at 100% as of December 31st, 2017. It went down to 85% at the end of 2018. The reason was for that is just it was a rough year for the financial markets. In the fourth quarter, I know the S&P was down 13%, which pretty much erased the gains that were made in the first 3 quarters of calendar year 2018. And really, if you look at page 93 and you look at the investment income for IMRF, it really explains it quite nicely. In 2017, it had investment income of 1.8 million, and in fiscal year 2018, it had an investment loss of 600,000. So that obviously accounts for the big reason why the percent funded had declined by about 15%. Looking at the other major fund in the city, the police pension fund, total pension liability increased by about 2.1 million. Our net position increased by 1.3 million. And our percent funded continues to etch up. We're at 45.5 as of April 30th, 2018, the end of last year. And now we're at 47% as of April 30th, 2019. Good news with the police pension fund. While the market was going through its volatility in the fourth quarter, actually the police pension fund was mostly in bonds, so we were shielded from that volatility in the market. And we were just at $10 million, which allows us to expand the allocation that we can invest in equity, going from 45 to 65%, but we didn't move those funds into equity until the new year, and then the market took off again. So the police pension fund was able to actually exceed its assumed rate of return. We assumed 7%. It actually finished the year at 7.56%, which definitely attributed to this positive increase in the percent funded. I just real quickly just wanted to touch on the bottom there. You can see the actuarial determined contributions. It used to be called the ARC, the actuarial required contributions. Obviously, since 2015, the city has either met or exceeded those. And then you can see that the contribution as a percent of covered payroll continues to increase. It probably will continue to increase as the amortization period gets shorter and shorter each year as we get to 2040. As you may recall, pursuant to the pension funding policy, our goal is to get the police pension fund 100% funded by the year 2040. More items of note, if you're interested in our long-term debt, you can check that out on beginning on page 60. If you're interested in any particular debt service schedule, that begins on 140. It lists out all the amortization schedules for all the debt that we have outstanding. Page 72 talks about the various developer commitments, mostly sales tax rebates agreements that the city has acquired over the last 20 years. And then we go to the final section of the CAFR called the statistical section. It begins on page 154. Has a lot of good information on historical trends covering, obviously city finances, revenue and debt capacity, demographic, economic info, and then some operating metrics and information. So I want to touch briefly on our employee counts. As you can see, we're at 77 full-time employees in 2019, which is pretty much in line with where we were in 2005, and about 20 less than we were when we had the most employees in the last 10 years or so in 2008. And then again, just wanted to mention briefly that on page 183, you can see a lot of the miscellaneous service data pertaining to traffic violations, street inventory, new housing starts, et cetera, et cetera. Just switching gears, just wanted to touch briefly on the management letter. As Brad already alluded to, this is a prior recommendation regarding the downtown TIF. It was over budget last year due to the acquisition of the downtown bank building. There was no impact to fund balance. It was a wash as both debits and credits were hit. So that's been taken care of. GASB statement number 74 and number 75, again, this is the first year that the GASB has required us to put our OPEB liability on the face of the financial statements. So if you look at page 25 in the statement of net position, you'll see an OPEB liability of about $1.05 million. And what that's attempting to do is measure the implicit cost of having the retirees on the city's health insurance program. Because in theory, if there were no retirees on the city's health insurance program, we pay a lower rate than we currently do because we are required by state statute to allow retirees into our health insurance program. Now, it is 100% funded. They have to pay 100% of their premium, but GASB requires us to capture that implicit cost and put it on the face of the financial statements. So that is something you'll see going forward, and that was something that we implemented for the first time here in fiscal year 2019. Again, we talk about the funds with negative equity. Obviously, the countryside and downtown TIFs we've already talked about. Hopefully, already in the countryside TIF, we've started to see a surplus this year of about $40,000.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as more and more development takes place out there, it'll generate sufficient increment to not only generate a surplus, but also continue to eliminate that negative equity position. And that's our goal ultimately too in the downtown TIFs. Currently, there's about a negative equity position, about $1 million in the first downtown TIF, and then the new downtown TIF has a slight negative equity position of about $2,700. The Sunflower Special Service Area, we'll talk about that as we get closer to tax levy time. That has a deficit right now of about $21,000, and that will be paid back within the next 4 to 5 years based on a 10-year plan that we've spoken about several years ago. And then land cash, this was temporary in nature. Last year it did have a negative equity position due to the costs associated with the riverfront and Bristol Bay Parks. We were reimbursed in FY19 for those expenditures, so that negative equity position in the land cash fund has been eliminated. So looking ahead, as we continue into the fiscal year, next week, actually at admin, we begin our 2019 tax levy discussion. We'll vote on the estimate for October 22nd for the public hearing. Hold the public hearing on November 12th, and then we'll have the last meeting in November and one meeting in December to discuss and potentially vote on the tax levy. After that, we go into everybody's favorite time of year, the budget. So we'll actually begin the budget process with our goal setting session later on this month. Staff will prepare the budget in November and December. We'll have it finalized for you, hopefully, by the end of January. It'll be presented in February. We'll have a public hearing in March, and then we'll have discussion and potential vote at the last meeting in March and those 2 meetings in April. So that concludes the presentation. Any questions?
Very nice. Questions, comments? Rob, one thing I really like about your presentation is you list the page numbers and also the PDF page numbers, because sometimes they can be so confusing. So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. No questions? Okay, thank you. You mentioned the October 19th meeting. I was going to mention that. Is there any additional business? Are there any citizen comments? Oops, I'm sorry. Mr. Funkhauser has something else.
Just 2 things. One, I know I've had conversations with the chief about the speeding along 34 and 47, the issues of the downtown. I know that we are implementing some new techniques, trying to mitigate the speeding, and I know we're trying to deal with just the continued construction that people perceive that it's not construction along 34 and are blazing through there. So I do appreciate the efforts that you're trying to go through, but it is definitely something that's an issue, especially downtown and in certain areas along Route 34. So I want to just keep that on the front burner of that one to manage. And the other, see, Erico, you're over there. I noticed, looking for Cannonball, the outside curve, I know it got paved there. Very good, thank you, that's very helpful. Now if we could do the inside curve, that would be helpful as well. So that's what I have, thank you.
Others? Okay, now we're to citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments? Please step forward, state your name.
Hi, my name is Rick Hanna. Thank you all for your very candid conversation today on the cannabis zoning requirements. I really appreciate you being very forthcoming. One of the things that concerns me as a citizen is I think of the Yorkville brand. I think of coming here 15 years ago in Yorkville. My wife and I came here because of the family-friendly, the great atmosphere, for a great place to raise a kid. I have no regrets. Daughter now is a teacher in the local school. I'm extremely concerned I understand that the state has allowed it, but I also understand that the state has granted the right of every local municipality to opt out of the program. Some of the municipalities that have opted out, St. Charles, Wheaton, Naperville, Plainfield, Lisle. These are wonderful communities. That's what I came here to Yorkville for, and I'm extremely disappointed that we would want to be so forthcoming. We show wonderful progress that we've made on the budget, the city's finances, and to be so overeager for tax revenues and this type of business in this community extremely disappoints me that that is not even considered as part of your decision-making process. Yorkville stands for something. There is a brand here. There was a brand that I came here for. If we go out and go for 4 licenses, shame on you. Shame on you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we have no need for executive session. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Schuster, second. Vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
So I have your next meeting.
Now,
No, not a good egg.
Mark's not here.